The deafening crack of a shovel striking hard earth echoed through Eldorado Canyon as Archer Patterson dug his mother's grave on a hillside overlooking the Nevada desert. Sweat dripped from his brow despite the cool spring air, his calloused hands gripping the wooden handle with determination that masked his grief. His mother's body, wrapped in her favorite quilt, lay nearby under the shade of the only cottonwood tree for miles. It was 1875, and Archer had been on the trail for 3 weeks, bringing his mother's body home to bury her in the place she'd always loved most. He'd promised her that much, though it had nearly broken him to keep that promise. The journey from Tucson had been brutal, but Ma deserved to rest where wildflowers would bloom over her grave. "Almost done, Ma," he whispered, his voice rough from disuse. The only conversations he'd had for weeks were with his horse, Thunder, and the memory of his mother. Archer didn't notice the figure approaching until the shadow fell across the partially dug grave. Looking up, he squinted against the setting sun to see a woman standing at the edge of the plot, holding a small bundle of desert flowers. "I heard someone was up here," she said softly. "I thought you might need this." She extended a canteen of water. Archer straightened, removing his hat and wiping his forehead with his sleeve. He stood well over 6 feet tall, his frame lean but strong from years of ranch work and riding. At 28, his face was weathered beyond his years, deep lines around his eyes from squinting at the horizon and a jawline shadowed with several days' growth of beard. "Much obliged, madam," he replied, accepting the water. As he drank, he studied the woman. She wore a simple black dress, marking her as a widow, though she couldn't have been more than 25. Her auburn hair was pinned back beneath a modest bonnet, and her eyes, a striking shade of green, held a familiar sorrow that matched his own. "Kate Ambrose," she offered. "Most folks call me Kate. Archer Patterson," he gestured to the grave. "Burying my mother. She always wanted to rest here in Eldorado Canyon," Kate nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I know something about burying loved ones. My husband's been in the ground for nearly a year now." She glanced at the small bundle of flowers in her hand. "These are for him, but—" She separated a few stems and placed them gently beside his mother's shrouded body. "These should go with her." Archer stared at the delicate purple blossoms. "Thank you, that's mighty kind." "They'll last," Kate said. "Desert marigolds. They hardly ever seem to die, even when cut. It's why I bring them to Thomas every week." She pointed down the hill to another grave marked with a wooden cross. "Sometimes it helps to have something that endures when everything else is taken from you." Something in her words cut through Archer's carefully constructed wall of stoicism. He turned back to the grave, driving the shovel into the earth with renewed vigor. "Would you like help?" Kate asked. Archer started to refuse this was his burden to bear, but found himself nodding instead. "There's another shovel on my pack horse, if you're willing." Kate retrieved the tool, hitched up her skirts slightly, and began to dig alongside him. They worked in silence as the sun sank toward the horizon, painting the canyon walls in brilliant oranges and reds. By dusk, the grave was ready. Archer gently lowered his mother's body into the earth, and together they filled the grave. He hammered a simple wooden marker into place. "Eleanor Patterson, beloved mother, 1828–1875. "Would you like to say words?" Kate asked, standing respectfully at his side. "Never was much for speeches," Archer admitted. "But she was a good woman, raised me alone after Pa was killed in a mining accident, taught me everything worth knowing." His voice cracked slightly. "Deserved better than to die of fever in some God-forsaken border town." Kate placed the remaining flowers on the fresh mound of earth. "May she rest in peace," she said softly, "and may these flowers remind you that some beauty never fades." As darkness descended over Eldorado Canyon, Kate invited Archer to come down to her small ranch for a hot meal. Too exhausted to refuse, he followed her down the path, leading Thunder behind him. Kate's property was modest, but well kept, a small cabin with a barn and corral behind it. A few cattle grazed in a nearby pasture, and chickens roosted in a small coop beside the house. "It's not much," Kate said, lighting a lamp as they entered the cabin, "but it's mine. Or was Thomas's, I suppose. Now I keep it running best I can." The interior was simple but comfortable: a wood stove, a table with chairs, a rocking chair near the fireplace, and a curtained-off area that presumably led to a bedroom. "You run this place alone?" Archer asked, removing his hat and placing it respectfully on a hook by the door. Kate nodded as she stoked the fire in the stove. "Thomas died in a stampede last spring. No children to help, and hiring hands costs more than I can manage most months." She shrugged. "I get by." As Kate prepared a simple stew with dried beef and vegetables, Archer found himself studying her. There was a quiet strength in her movements, a resilience that reminded him of his mother. Both women had faced the harshness of the frontier with dignity and determination. Over dinner, Kate asked about Archer's plans. "Don't rightly have any," he admitted. "Been working cattle drives between Texas and Kansas for years. Was in Arizona when word came about Ma taking ill. Got there too late." He stared into his bowl. "Promised her I'd bring her home, so I did. Beyond that." He trailed off with a shrug. "You could stay a while," Kate suggested, then quickly added, "Eldorado Canyon needs skilled ranch hands. The Williamsons over at Sundown Ranch are always looking for help. Pays fair, from what I hear." Archer considered this. He had nowhere pressing to be, and the thought of riding away from his mother's grave so soon felt wrong somehow. "Might look into that," he said finally. That night, Kate insisted Archer take the small bedroom while she would sleep on a pallet near the fire. Despite his protests, she was firm. "You've been on the trail for weeks with your mother's body," she said gently. "You need proper rest more than I do." Lying on a real bed for the first time in months, Archer stared at the ceiling, listening to the quiet sounds of the house settling and Kate's soft breathing from the main room. Something about her kindness had touched him deeply, a warmth he hadn't felt since before his mother fell ill. When morning came, Archer woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Kate was already up, tending to her daily chores. Without being asked, he joined her, feeding the chickens and helping mend a broken fence post. "You don't have to do this," Kate said as they worked side by side. "Seems only fair after your kindness," Archer replied. "Besides, idle hands never sat well with me." By midday, Archer had decided to ride to Sundown Ranch to inquire about work. Before leaving, he hesitated at Kate's door. "I'll be back, if that's all right with you," he said, "to check on my mother's grave and to thank you properly for your help." Kate smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I'd like that, Mr. Patterson." "Archer," he corrected. "Just Archer is fine." "Archer," she repeated, and the sound of his name on her lips stayed with him as he rode towards Sundown Ranch. The Williamsons proved to be fair employers. John Williamson, a gruff man in his 50s with a reputation for honesty, offered Archer work, helping with spring, calving, and preparing for the summer drive. "Can put you up in the bunkhouse with the other hands," Williamson said, stroking his gray beard. "Pays $3 a week plus meals." Archer accepted immediately. The work was familiar, the kind his hands knew well, and it would keep him close to his mother's resting place and to Kate, though he wasn't ready to examine those feelings too closely. Over the following weeks, Archer fell into a routine. Days were spent working cattle, mending fences, and breaking horses at sundown. Evenings often found him riding to Kate's small ranch to help with chores she couldn't manage alone, fixing the leaky roof, reinforcing the chicken coop against predators, or helping move her small herd to fresh pasture. Each Sunday, they would visit their respective graves. Archer noticed that the desert marigolds Kate had placed on his mother's grave remained vibrant, seemingly untouched by time or weather. When he mentioned this, Kate smiled. "That's why I choose them," she explained. "They remind me that some things can endure, even in the harshest conditions." She gently touched one of the blossoms. "My grandmother taught me how to dry and preserve them so they keep their color. It's a small skill, but it brings me comfort." As spring gave way to summer, Archer found himself thinking of Kate during long days on the range. Her quiet strength, her gentle laugh that emerged more frequently as they grew comfortable with each other. The way sunlight caught in her auburn hair when she worked in her garden, these images stayed with him. One evening in late June, Archer arrived at Kate's cabin to find her struggling with a stubborn pump that refused to draw water. "Been fighting with this thing all day," she admitted, frustration evident in her voice. "Without water, I can't tend my garden, and without the garden." She didn't need to finish. In the precarious economy of frontier survival, one failed system could mean disaster. Together, they dismantled the pump, Archer's strong hands working methodically to identify the problem. Kate held a lantern as darkness fell, providing light as he worked. "There," he said finally, pulling out a small stone that had lodged in the mechanism. "Should work now." When water flowed freely from the pump, Kate's face lit up with relief. Without thinking, she threw her arms around Archer's neck in a grateful embrace. For a moment, they stood frozen, the sudden intimacy surprising them both. Archer could feel her heartbeat against his chest, smell the faint scent of lavender in her hair. Slowly, hesitantly, his arms encircled her waist. Kate pulled back slightly, her green eyes meeting his, a question in them that Archer couldn't answer with words. Instead, he lowered his head and gently pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was brief, tender, a question as much as an answer. When they parted, Kate's cheeks were flushed, but she didn't step away. "I should go," Archer said softly, suddenly uncertain. "The men will be wondering where I am." Kate nodded, but her hand caught his as he turned to leave. "Will you come tomorrow?" "Wild horses couldn't keep me away," he promised. That night in the bunkhouse, Archer lay awake, replaying the moment in his mind. He hadn't planned to kiss Kate, hadn't even admitted to himself how deeply his feelings for her had grown. Since his mother's death, he'd been drifting, untethered, but somehow Kate had become an anchor in his life. The next day dragged endlessly. When Archer finally rode to Kate's cabin, he found her waiting on the porch, a nervousness in her posture that mirrored his own. "I've been thinking about yesterday," she said directly as he dismounted. "So have I," Archer admitted, removing his hat. "I haven't felt anything for anyone since Thomas died," Kate continued. "Didn't think I wanted to, but you." She took a deep breath. "You make me remember what it's like to look forward to tomorrow." Archer climbed the porch steps slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wished. She didn't move. "I don't have much to offer a woman like you," he said honestly. "Been a drifter most of my life. Never stayed in one place long enough to put down roots." "And now?" Kate asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Archer reached out, gently tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "Now I'm finding reasons to stay." That evening, they sat on Kate's porch, watching the sunset paint the canyon walls. They talked of their pasts, Archer's years on cattle drives, Kate's childhood in Missouri, before coming west with her parents, meeting Thomas when she was 19, losing him just 4 years later. "Do you think it's disloyal?" Kate asked suddenly. "To feel something for someone else?" Archer considered this carefully. "My ma once told me that love isn't something finite, that caring for someone new doesn't diminish what came before." He took Kate's hand in his. "Thomas would want you to be happy, I reckon. Just like my ma would want that for me." As summer progressed, their relationship deepened. Archer continued working at Sundown Ranch, but spent every free moment with Kate. Together, they repaired her cabin, expanded her garden, and slowly increased her small herd of cattle. Each Sunday, they visited both graves, Kate bringing fresh desert marigolds that never seemed to wilt. Word spread through Eldorado Canyon about the widow and the cowboy. Some gossips clucked their tongues at the propriety of it all, but most folks were simply happy to see Kate smile again. She had been too young for such prolonged grief. In late July, tragedy struck Sundown Ranch when a flash flood swept through the lower pastures, drowning several cattle and destroying a critical irrigation dam. All hands worked frantically to save what livestock they could and recover what was lost. For 3 days, Archer worked alongside the other ranch hands, barely sleeping, his muscles screaming in protest as they fought against nature's destruction. When he finally returned to Kate's cabin, exhausted beyond words, she took one look at him and led him to her wash basin. Tenderly, she helped him remove his mud-caked shirt, bathing his wounded hands where rope burns had cut into the flesh. She washed the grime from his face, her touch gentle against the scratches on his cheek where a panicked steer had caught him with its horn. "You could have been killed," she whispered, fear evident in her voice. "Takes more than a little flood to do me in," Archer replied, attempting humor despite his exhaustion, Kate's hands stilled on his face. "I couldn't bear to lose you two," she admitted. "Not when I've just found you." The vulnerability in her voice undid something in Archer. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I'm not going anywhere, Kate, not unless you send me away." That night, for the first time, Archer stayed. Their love was gentle, tender, both giving and seeking comfort in equal measure. Afterward, as Kate lay curled against his side, Archer watched the moonlight filter through the cabin window, illuminating her sleeping face. He'd never imagined finding this kind of peace, this sense of belonging. His life had been one of constant movement, horizons always beckoning. Now, for the first time, he wanted nothing more than to remain exactly where he was. As August turned the canyon into a furnace, tensions rose throughout the territory. Drought threatened the cattle, water rights became contentious, and rumors of rustlers operating in the area put everyone on edge. John Williamson called his men together one evening. "Someone's been taking cattle from the north pasture," he announced grimly. "Not many, 1 or 2 at a time, but enough that it's becoming a problem. Starting tonight, we ride patrol in shifts. Archer's patrol fell on the 3rd night." He rode the boundaries of Sundown's property, alert for any sign of trouble. Near midnight, he spotted movement near the creek that marked the northern boundary, shadows moving against shadows. Approaching cautiously, Archer dismounted and crept closer. 3 men were herding several sundown cattle toward a narrow pass that led out of the canyon. Drawing his revolver, Archer stepped into view. "That's far enough, boys." The rustlers reacted instantly. One dove for cover, another reached for his gun, while the third bolted for his horse. Gunfire erupted, shots echoing off the canyon walls. Archer fired twice, hitting one man in the shoulder. The second rustler's bullet grazed Archer's side, tearing through his shirt and leaving a burning trail across his ribs. Despite the pain, Archer managed to disarm and subdue the wounded rustler while the others fled into the night. By dawn, Archer had delivered the captured rustler to the sheriff in town and returned to Sundown Ranch with the recovered cattle. John Williamson insisted he see the doctor about his wound. "Just a scratch," Archer protested, though blood had soaked through his makeshift bandage. "Don't be a fool, Patterson," Williamson growled. "That scratch gets infected, you could lose more than a day's work." The doctor confirmed it was indeed a flesh wound, but cleaned and stitched it properly. "Keep it clean, no heavy lifting for a week, and you'll be fine," he instructed. When Kate heard about the incident, she appeared at Sundown Ranch, her face pale with worry. "You're coming home with me," she insisted, brooking no argument. "I can tend to you better than those rough men in the bunkhouse." Too tired to protest, Archer allowed her to help him onto his horse and lead him back to her cabin. There, she carefully rebandaged his wound, her hands gentle but her expression fierce. "You could have been killed," she said, echoing her words from weeks earlier. "Had to protect the herd," Archer replied simply. "And who protects you?" Kate demanded, tears suddenly brimming in her eyes. "I've already buried one man I loved. I won't bury another." Archer caught her hand, his heart stuttering at her words. "You love me?" Kate stared at him as though surprised by her own admission. Slowly, she nodded. "I do. God help me, I do." Pulling her close with his good arm, Archer kissed her deeply. "I love you too, Kate. Have for a while now, just been too cowardly to say it." As August gave way to September, Archer's wound healed, and he began to consider his future more seriously. His arrangement with Williamson had been temporary help through calving season and the summer drive. With fall approaching, decisions needed to be made. One evening, as they sat on Kate's porch watching twilight settle over the canyon, Archer broached the subject. "Williamson's offered me a permanent position," he said. "Foreman of the north section." Kate's hands stilled in her lap. "That's good news," she said carefully. "It's a respected position." "It is," Archer agreed, "but I've been thinking about something else." He turned to face her fully. "This place, your ranch, it has potential. The grazing's good, water's reliable with that spring feeding the creek. With some work, we could double your herd by next year." Kate looked at him, confusion evident in her expression. Archer took her hands in his. "I'm asking if you'd consider taking me on as a partner in the ranch and—" He paused, gathering his courage. "In life." Understanding dawned in Kate's eyes. "Archer Patterson, are you proposing to me?" "Doing a poor job of it, seems like," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "But yes, Kate Ambrose, I am. I love you, want to build something with you if you'll have me." Tears filled Kate's eyes as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, I'll have you." Their wedding took place in early October, a simple ceremony in the town church with the Williamsons and a few neighbors as witnesses. Kate wore a dress of pale blue, not white, as she'd been married before, but not the black she'd worn for mourning either. It symbolized her new beginning, she told Archer. Before the ceremony, they visited both graves. Kate placed fresh desert marigolds on each mound, the preserved flowers vibrant against the earth. "I wish they could be here," she said softly. Archer squeezed her hand. "Maybe they are, in their own way." As winter settled over Eldorado Canyon, Archer and Kate worked side by side to prepare their ranch, their home, for the cold months ahead. They repaired the barn, laid in supplies, and made plans for spring breeding that would strengthen their small but growing herd. In the evenings, they would sit before the fire, Kate often working on her preserved flower arrangements, which had begun to sell well in town, providing additional income. Archer would clean his tack or carve small wooden figures, a skill his mother had taught him that he was rediscovering. "What should we call it?" Archer asked one night as snow fell gently outside. "The ranch, I mean, it should have a name." Kate considered this. "Marigold Ranch," she suggested with a smile, "for the flowers that never die." "Marigold it is," Archer agreed, kissing her softly. As December turned to January, Kate shared news that filled Archer's heart with joy. She was expecting their first child, due in summer. "A child," he whispered, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our child." Kate covered his hand with hers. "Our future," she corrected. Spring came early that year. By March, the hills around Eldorado Canyon were carpeted with wildflowers, and the anniversary of Patterson's burial approached. Together, Archer and Kate climbed the hill to visit the grave, Kate now showing the gentle swell of their coming child. To Archer's amazement, the desert marigolds Kate had placed on his mother's grave a year ago remained vibrant, their color undimmed by time or weather. "How is this possible?" he asked. Touching the petals gently, Kate smiled. "Some things endure, even when everything around them changes." Love is like that too. As they stood together beside the grave, Archer reflected on the journey that had brought him here. A year ago, he had been a drifter, a man without roots, burying his mother with a heart full of grief and no clear path forward. Now he stood on land that was his, beside a woman he loved, with a child on the way and a future stretching before them. "Thank you, Ma," he whispered, "for bringing me home." Kate squeezed his hand, understanding the depth of his gratitude. "And thank you," she added softly to the grave, "for raising a son who could teach me to love again." They planted new flowers around both graves that day, living plants that would bloom year after year, a testament to lives remembered and honored. But they left the preserved marigolds in place, a reminder that some beauty never truly fades. Summer brought sweltering heat to the canyon, but also the birth of their daughter, whom they named Catherine Patterson, Ellie for short. She arrived during a rare summer thunderstorm that broke weeks of drought, bringing life-giving rain to the parched land. "She's perfect," Archer whispered, cradling his daughter for the first time, her tiny hand wrapped around his finger with surprising strength. Kate smiled tiredly from the bed. "She has your eyes. And your spirit, I'd wager," Archer replied, carefully passing the baby back to her mother. Strong like her mama, as Ellie grew, so did Marigold Ranch. With careful management and hard work, Archer and Kate increased their herd, added chickens and a few horses, and even planted a small orchard that would bear fruit in years to come. Word of Kate's preserved flowers spread beyond Eldorado Canyon. Orders came from as far away as Carson City for her arrangements, which never wilted or lost their color. She taught the skill to several local women, creating a small cottage industry that provided additional income for families throughout the area. On Ellie's first birthday, they took her to visit her grandmother's grave. The marigolds still bloomed there, eternal in their preserved state. "These were the first flowers I ever gave your father," Kate told her daughter, who watched with wide eyes, "before I even knew I loved him." "And I'll tell you a secret," Archer added, lifting Ellie onto his shoulders. "They're how I knew your mama was special. Anyone who could make flowers live forever had to have magic in her soul." Kate laughed, the sound echoing off the canyon walls. "Not magic, just patience and care. The same things that make anything worthwhile last." As years passed, Eldorado Canyon changed. The railroad came within 20 miles, bringing new settlers and opportunities. Sundown Ranch expanded, and the town grew from a dusty outpost to a proper community with a school, a larger church, and even a small hotel. Marigold Ranch prospered as well. By the time Ellie was 5, she had a younger brother, Thomas Archer Patterson, a sturdy boy with his mother's auburn hair and his father's quiet determination. Through it all, Archer and Kate maintained their Sunday tradition of visiting the graves, bringing fresh marigolds to replace those that eventually, even with Kate's preservation techniques, began to fade. They told their children stories of the grandmother and the first husband they had never known, but whose legacies had shaped their family in profound ways. "Without loss, we might never have found each other," Kate reflected one evening as they sat on their porch, watching their children play in the yard. "It seems strange to be grateful for something so painful." Archer nodded, understanding perfectly. "Life has a way of growing beauty from the hardest ground," he said, thinking of the flowers that had first connected them. "Just like your marigolds." On the 10th anniversary of Eleanor Patterson's burial, the family made their pilgrimage up the hillside. Ellie, now 9, carried a bouquet of freshly preserved marigolds. Thomas, at 4, struggled to keep up on the steep path, eventually demanding to be carried on his father's shoulders. The graves were well-tended, permanent stone markers having replaced the wooden crosses years ago. Kate had planted perennial flowers around both, creating a small garden of remembrance that bloomed from spring through fall. As the children placed fresh flowers on each grave, Archer wrapped his arm around Kate's waist, drawing her close against his side. "Did you ever imagine this?" he asked softly. "That day when you found me digging my mother's grave," Kate shook her head, "I only knew I couldn't bear to see another soul suffering alone as I had." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I never expected to find my heart again. Funny how life works," Archer mused. "I came here to bury my past, and instead found my future." Below them, Eldorado Canyon stretched out in the afternoon sun. Their ranch visible in the distance, the barn he had built with his own hands, the expanded cabin that was now a proper house, the cattle grazing peacefully in pastures that had once been scrubland. It was a life neither of them could have envisioned in their darkest moments of grief. "Mama," Ellie called from the graves. "Look, some of the old flowers are still perfect." Kate smiled, unsurprised. She had long ago perfected her preservation technique, and some of her earliest arrangements had lasted for years without fading. "That's because they're special," she explained, kneeling beside her daughter. They remind us that love endures, even when everything else changes. Archer watched his family, the wife who had healed his broken heart, the children who filled his days with purpose and joy, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. From the depths of loss, they had built something beautiful together, something that, like Kate's marigolds, would endure long after they were gone. As the sun began to set over Eldorado Canyon, casting long shadows across the hillside, the Patterson family made their way down the path toward home. Behind them, the marigolds stood vibrant against the darkening sky flowers that never died, symbols of a love that had bloomed from the most unlikely soil. That night, after the children were asleep, Archer and Kate sat on their porch as they had countless nights before, watching stars appear above the canyon. "I've been thinking," Archer said, taking Kate's hand in his, "about expanding again. The Henderson place to the east is for sale. Good water rights connects to our north pasture." Kate smiled. "Always thinking ahead, aren't you?" "Have to," Archer replied. "Got a family to provide for now." "Do you ever miss it?" Kate asked suddenly. "The open road, the freedom of not being tied to one place." Archer considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it," he admitted. "Just me and a horse and the horizon, but then—" He squeezed her hand. "Then I remember what I've found instead, and there's no comparison." Kate leaned against him, her head fitting perfectly against his shoulder as it always had. "When I put those first flowers on your mother's grave, I never imagined where it would lead." "To right here," Archer said simply. "Exactly where we're meant to be." As moonlight bathed Eldorado Canyon in silver, Archer Patterson held his wife close, grateful for the twists of fate that had brought them together, a grieving cowboy burying his mother in spring, a widow with flowers that never died, and the enduring love that had bloomed between them, as vibrant and eternal as the marigolds on the hillside.